Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, wherever in the world you may be joining us from today. My name is Francesco Del Carpio, and I am the Operations Coordinator for CFAL York. I would like to officially open the 10th session of the Climate Change Emergencies and Cultural Heritage Speaker Series, which is being presented in partnership with Heritage Ottawa. I would like to begin today's session with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge and recognize that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territory upon which our campuses are located that precede the establishment of York University. The area is known as Tkaronto and has been caretaken by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. The territory is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. As this is an online event, our participants may be joining from various locations, so I strongly encourage you to learn about the traditional land upon which you are located. With this, I welcome our moderator, our speaker, and our participants from around the world. Welcome to our webinar. Without further ado, it is my great pleasure to introduce our moderator today, Dr. Monia Del Pinto. Dr. Monia Del Pinto is a postdoctoral researcher in the School of Architecture, Building and Civil Engineering at Loughborough University, where she was recently awarded the Loughborough University Vice Chancellor Independent Research Fellowship to further her studies on urban form and disaster risk. Monia's work falls at the intersections of architecture, urban planning, heritage studies, and disaster studies, and aims at innovating methodologies and tools for effective disaster risk reduction at the urban scale. Her research on urban form and disaster risk reconceptualized spatial vulnerability in earthquake-prone settlements and developed a methodology for its assessment, which is being pilot tested in World Heritage cities exposed to climate-induced threats. Monia has professional experience in post-earthquake reconstruction in L'Aquila, is active in communication and training activities for an integrated approach to urban disaster risk management, and since 2014 has been teaching architecture-related disciplines with an international and multicultural context between Italy, Turkey, and the UK. She is currently leading the module of disaster risk management for the built environment at Loughborough University. Dr. Del Pinto, thank you very much for moderating today's session, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Francesco, for the introduction and for having me again today. I'm going to introduce today's speaker, who's Dr. Deniz Ikiz. She's an assistant professor on heritage and climate change within the Unit of Architectural and Urban Design and Engineering at the Department of the Built Environment in the Eindhoven University of Technology. She is trained as an architect and holds a master's degree in heritage conservation and a PhD in architecture, awarded by the Oxford Brookes University in the UK. She initially joined the Eindhoven University of Technology as a postdoctoral researcher in 2019 and was then promoted to the assistant professor position in April 2020. She is also an Erin Curie Fellow. Dr. Kaya's expertise lies in the cultural heritage field and its conjunction with the sustainable development, climate mitigation, and adaptation agendas. Her research interests concentrate on exploring and assessing how the existing buildings, cities, and landscapes are transformed and reshaped under the impact of climate change, and how their protection, continued use, and adaptation can be ensured in a sustainable, inclusive, and innovative way, while capturing and managing their inherent values in response to the existing societal challenges. Her research and education agendas aim to mobilize heritage and the built environment as an asset and driver towards sustainability and climate action. Dr. Kaya is also an active member of ICOMOS, the International Council of Monuments and Sites, and the Climate Heritage Network. She is also an editorial board member of the Journal of Design and Theory and acts as a specialist assessor for the British Council Cultural Heritage Fund. Before leaving the stage to Deniz for a presentation, just a quick recap on a few housekeeping rules. If you have any questions that you would like me to address to Dr. Kaya in the Q&A, please feel free to type them in the chat or in the QA box, and we will be able to then discuss them at the end of the presentation. Without further ado, I leave the stage to Ikiz.
Yeah, thank you very much, Monia, for the introduction. And also thank you very much to all the organizers for this kind invitation. I'm very honored and pleasure to be included in the Climate Change Emergencies and Cultural Heritage lecture series. So without any further ado, let me first start by sharing my screen. I hope you can see it well. I guess so. And yeah, again, I would like to start also with like a land acknowledgement, and also, I mean, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the participants. It's a great pleasure to be here. So today in my talk, I would like to concentrate on how to build a climate resilient heritage together with the local communities and stakeholders through inclusive and participatory processes. So I will a bit start by talking about the certain like knowledge and the knowledge gaps about the methodology, and then I will present you some examples from the like the research projects that we've been involved in as part of the EU funded or nationally funded projects. So let me first start by defining the broad scope of cultural heritage as it is embodied in our studies. So as you all know, cultural heritage is both a produce and a process that provides societies with tangible and intangible resources that are inherited from the past, like created in the present and then bestowed to the future generations. But actually, the broad scope of cultural heritage is not only limited to physical artifacts or built heritage, like monuments, historic buildings or structures, or archaeological remains, but it also encompasses natural and intangible dimensions, so as well as human and non-human factors. So in the way that we actually interfere or try to understand heritage, it's important, and the impacts of climate change, it's important to understand the wider scope that it encompasses. For instance, I'll give you an example regarding coastal heritage, which is a type of heritage that we extensively deal with in our research work. So when thinking about coastal heritage, actually non-human factors such as water and landscape are essential heritage attributes that the communities, visitors or residents build a certain relationship with or attach certain meaning or values to. It is in the way that they actually interpret or like connect with the water, or it is in the way that they shape or adapt the coastal landscapes to actually adapt coastal changes over time, or it is in the socioeconomic activities, water-related socioeconomic activities such as fishing or agricultural practices, and the cultural connection of communities with these non-human factors that are all essential cornerstones of the way they attribute value to their heritage. So actually it goes beyond the built heritage, the physical artifacts, but it also involves natural and intangible dimensions, as well as the human and non-human actors. As we all know, climate change is one of the biggest threats that we face today. And it has detrimental impact on biodiversity and serious effects on people's livelihoods and communities, including the cultural heritage. So cultural heritage is affected by the impacts of climate change, but its connection to climate change is not only limited to its vulnerability and how it is threatened by these impacts. Cultural heritage is also an essential resource in our for climate action, in our attempts to adapt or mitigate its impacts. Like reducing the carbon emissions is referred to as climate mitigation, and built heritage can play a significant role to support climate mitigation through retrofitting or adaptive reuse of existing historic structures or buildings. So the reuse of an existing building or structure, it reduces raw material use, it cuts the carbon emissions, it cuts the energy consumption, it reduces the waste and environmental costs. So actually it contributes significantly to sustainable and circular built environment. But on the other hand, climate adaptation, it is concerned with actions taken to reduce and adjust to adverse impacts of climate change. While there are certain global metrics to measure the greenhouse gas emissions for mitigation, there is no universally acknowledged metric system or like certain criteria to measure climate adaptation. So the success of climate adaptation is hard to assess as the conditions under which adaptation responses reduce impact or cause unintended negative consequences. It varies significantly across time, space, and population groups. So to be able to address and actually accommodate the variety of responses and priority of diverse range of groups, social groups, or actors, we need inclusive climate adaptation strategies and action. And I would like to highlight inclusiveness here. So cultural heritage can play a significant role here. Heritage connects people to places. It encourages a sense of place and belonging, and it also fosters social inclusion, while also accommodating integrative knowledge systems that also includes the traditional, local, and indigenous knowledge systems. We can also learn from past adaptation practices, past experiences, how people or communities used to adapt to environmental change over time. And we can actually learn and integrate these past experiences into our current actions taken to better adapt to the changes that are happening now, because environmental change is not something new, but climate change is. Anyhow, so cultural heritage can play a significant role here. Another contribution of heritage, which is a bit actually underrated at the moment, so actually there aren't that much of emphasis on that yet, a knowledge and research gap actually, that heritage can also provide essential methodological and practical contribution for successful climate adaptation planning and practice. And this can be done through participatory and inclusive methodologies and processes. As an interdisciplinary domain, the heritage field takes into account multiple denotations that provides multiple means of meaning or values and helps to co-create multiple features. The heritage management discourse also provides and has experience with diverse sets of skills and methodologies that support inclusive and participatory decision-making processes. Being inclusive of multiple voices, multiple values, priorities, and reflections of a diverse and varied set of social groups, stakeholders, and communities is essential for climate adaptation, which should also include the marginalized and indigenous groups. In the absence of such inclusive processes, actually there might be negative consequences or reactions from various groups where actually that can lead to maladaptation or jeopardize the effectiveness of the actions taken. So I'll give you an example in that sense from the Netherlands. So Oud-Dam is a small settlement that is located within the province of North Holland, as you can see here in this map. And it's actually located on the coastal side of the Markermeer, which used to be a sea inlet, but then it was turned into a freshwater lake after the construction of a large dam in 1930s. And as you can see from this image, so it's a like aerial view of this small settlement. So the coastal changes and coastal erosion and water level rise are significant threats to the site, as well as the salination of the water, because with the sea level rise, like more seawater, let's say, or salty water comes into this freshwater source. So salination is a big issue, and also drought during the summer are some of the climatic risks caused to the site. And so for this site, the Regional Water Board, together with the local and regional authorities and some private partners, have actually developed and started to implement a new climate adaptation strategy, which has been, as you can see from this image, the rise and expansion of the existing dikes. So dikes are kind of like barriers that prevent the flood risks. This decision on this climate adaptation action was given in a top-down manner without a direct consultation to the local communities. And actually it triggered quite some reactions and opposition from the local residents, because it kind of interrupted their connection to the water, and it actually interferes with their unique landscape. So it kind of shows us that where the necessary groups, especially local communities, are not included in decision making, the climate adaptation strategies or actions, even though they actually contribute to preventing certain risks, they can also turn into maladaptation because they are not well incorporated to the values or to the social, economic, and cultural lives of the communities there. So in the nexus of heritage and climate change, there exists some knowledge and methodological gaps. And the existing studies on the topic either rely on climate data that is derived from satellite imagery or sensors or some other sorts of climate science data sources, or qualitative data that is derived from literature reviews or expert opinion. But yet, there has also been a methodological gap that brings together more participatory processes and participatory tools, not only, that incorporates the views, reflections, and actually opinions of diverse stakeholder and community groups in the processes. So in response to these gaps, me and my colleagues, we have concentrated our research efforts and implemented applied research efforts, so to speak, on bridging the divide between the climate science and the heritage research, developing innovative, interdisciplinary, and inclusive approaches that not only monitors or mitigates the risks posed to cultural heritage, but also harness the potential of heritage for effective climate adaptation. For the rest of this presentation, I will show you several examples from the participatory methods and applications we implemented. So I would like to first start by introducing you the Teatita project, which is a EU funded by the European Union's Horizon Europe framework. It is a large consortium project with a big consortium, including 7 pilot sites and I think more than 15 partners across Europe. And the primary objective of this project is to develop and implement an integrated multiple risk monitoring and management system for underwater and coastal heritage sites across Europe. And as part of this project, there are a wide number of monitoring methods and tools and innovations that have been developed, such as the use of remote sensing or in situ sensors that are attached to boats or by using AUVs for underwater. But also citizen science and participatory tools are an important element of this project, which I would like to a bit more delve into. So in addition to environmental data that are collected through sensors, the local stakeholders and users and community groups are engaged by 2 different participatory methods. One of them is through living labs, which I will tell you more about in a second, for collaborative decision making and building certain long-term monitoring roadmaps. And the other one is through citizen science, where actually citizens, that includes visitors, residents, etc., in crowdsourcing data collection, in collecting data. So first, let me start by a bit defining on the living labs. Living labs are multi-stakeholder platforms and interaction spaces that bring together multiple stakeholders and end users to form public-private pupil partnerships to collaborate in co-creation platforms. These co-creation platforms can actually contribute to different functions, can serve to different functions. In the scope of this project, for instance, we use them for impact and value assessment to better understand, what is really significant about these sites. With climate change, at some point, loss and damage is inevitable. but then what can be lost for the communities and what should not be lost under any condition, which should be really protected? And what are the also impacts that goes beyond just the climatic impacts to better understand the more also related socioeconomic, cultural, and environmental impacts? And also to build a climate resilient future together with all these actors are kind of like the core of the living labs here. And they base on a certain core principles that you can see here in this image. For instance, multi-stakeholder participation and inclusiveness are essential cornerstones of these living labs methods. And also, again, as part of this project, the living labs aim to undertake 4 different tasks. Value assessments. So it is important to understand the historical and cultural significance of the sites, as well as the social, economic, and cultural values of these sites. In terms of impact assessment, actually the climatic impacts go beyond to just like environmental or climate-induced impacts for the site. They all actually have cumulative effects that also affect their everyday living, the socioeconomic activities, as well as the environmental factors related to this site. So whereas the climate data can provide us these more climate-induced impacts, living labs can actually help us to better draw and to better understand these cumulative effects. So also impact assessments are part of the objectives that lie at the heart of the living labs, and also co-developing future scenarios. So to understand what is important and how we can build a climate resilient future for these sites, it's also part of these living labs. So actually, in that sense, living labs are an important tool here for collective decision making, and also it supports inclusive processes because it brings together different stakeholders and communities. And here you can see a wide range of participatory tools that we can employ within these stakeholder and community engagement processes. Of course, this is a big set of participatory methods, and they can be sorted into more dialogue-based tools or more co-design based tools. In regards to dialogue-based participatory tools, you can see kind of their overall distribution in regards to the number of participants that it engages, or like what type of engagement methods they use, whether open-ended or closed responses. For instance, consensus building, I'll just give you an example here, is an important dialogue-based participatory tool. It actually really becomes handy when, let's say, there is a need to reach a consensus or a shared understanding agreement among a diverse range of actors, where they might have some competing or conflicting needs or priorities, so to speak, and it can really contribute to long-term vision making or building certain roadmaps. So it can integrate different types of participatory tools, such as focus groups or more using structured decision support tools. But it's an important method when there's a need to reach a consensus on a certain vision or something. In terms of co-design based participatory tools, you can actually also see their distribution regarding for what purposes they can be used. And what is common for this type of tools is that they use visual imageries as part of a decision-making process or as an output, so to speak. For instance, maps can be used to map out the values that people attach to certain places, or to see and reflect upon what kind of future proposals can be co-created. Or, for instance, certain games or simulations can be used to build some future scenarios. Again, visualizations in the form of AR or VR imageries can really help increase visibility and accessibility of certain sites. For instance, here you can see an example of participatory co-mapping that brought together young professionals, also local stakeholders, to better understand, the climatic impacts on a certain landscape area. And they come together to actually develop certain design solutions for the site. And here is an example in terms of an AR like imagery that is created of a underwater shipwreck, which is produced by our colleagues from NTUA in Greece. So this type of visualizations and AR technology or VR technology can become really handy, for especially sites that are hard to have access to, that are not always easily visible. For instance, for some of the underwater sites, you need a diver's license to be able to really see it in close eye. But such types of visualizations can really help to raise awareness, to educate people, young people, communities about it, and actually really make them more accessible. Again, so there is a wide range of tools and methods to choose from to engage communities and stakeholders through focus groups or living labs. Civil science, again, or digital crowdsourcing tools can really also foster inclusive processes, because these types of digital tools, for instance, they can deputize the public in monitoring and recording heritage at risk. This is an example of a crowdsourcing app and how it can be used. That is in the process of development from our colleagues as part of the Teatite project, again, colleagues from ICCS, again, located in Greece. So with this crowdsourcing app, for instance, visitors or community members in their everyday engagement with the landscape or the coastal area, if they see a certain change, a certain impact on the site, they can just record it immediately. They can take a photo of it, they can make a video recording of it, and they can upload it on this app. And then it goes into the digital platform and an open repository where it can really actually help to monitoring through crowdsourcing. So the people, citizens really participate in the data collection and development of this monitoring system. This is another example from a PhD candidate from our group, Haopang Lee. And he, for instance, conducted a literature review and then conducted interviews and a survey with a number of experts and practitioners worldwide to better understand the barriers to climate adaptation for historic urban landscapes. But of course, this type of studies also have certain limitations, so to speak, because it collects the subjective views or reflections of a limited number of participants concerning like the barriers in this case or some other sources. And it's actually one of the so to speak handicaps or limitation of participatory tools because you're actually constrained to the subjective views or reflections of the number of participants that you engage with. But then are they really as diverse and representative of all to encompass all the relevant groups, their point of views, and their actually priorities and needs? So it's always a question mark whether or not participatory tools are enough to support inclusiveness and diversity. And it's a kind of a dilemma within itself. But there's also some certain other tools or technologies that can support the access to larger data sets or to larger number of people, so to speak. For instance, a machine learning can really become handy in such conditions. Because, I mean, machine learning, you can actually train AI to help you deal with larger sets of big data and also algorithms. For instance, you can use AI and the algorithms to analyze big data that is derived from social media. For instance, some colleagues from TU Delft has used AI to deal with more user-generated information that is available on social media platforms in the form of images, hashtags, ratings, and that they have actually used this sort of data to better understand, the image of tourists on certain destinations such as Venice, and to understand the collective perception of certain heritage sites. Another example or another way of using machine learning can be done through text mining and natural language processing. For instance, again, another colleague from our research group, Kevin Plus, he works with natural language processing, where actually he looks into large data sets derived from historical newspapers and like databases, where he looks into like themes, reflections, and reactions in regards to past like change, coastal change, and also different adaptation practices that have been implemented in the past. And he actually collects themes and like sentiments and reactions regarding these big adaptation changes that took place in the past. And he collects actually like these themes to better understand, how people reacted to certain climate adaptation practices that took place in the past, how we can learn from that, and then actually incorporate this knowledge to the current and like future adaptation planning and practices. And so, and there are like all very different sorts of ways to use machine learning. It can be used through sentiment analysis, it can be used for predictive modeling. Of course, it's also a very, very new area. So, I mean, AI and machine learning has been very, very recently been used to help actually climate adaptation decision-making and planning through the use of big data and large data sets. And the last example, actually, I would like to present here is about heritage-based education, training and capacity building, which can also foster collaboration and partnerships with decisions and policymakers concerning climate adaptation of heritage sites. So this example I'd like to present you is again from another EU-funded EU-funded Erasmus Plus project that we ran with several higher education institutes, heritage organizations, and a communication partner. And as part of this project, we developed a e-learning platform and also an education program for climate resilient European built heritage. And it actually includes a lot of learning modules. We conduct student seminars and also workshops. And these are an example of 3 workshops that we conducted in 3 different locations, where actually students from varying disciplines, including architecture, engineering, heritage and tourism studies, as well as computer sciences from across Europe, came together to, first of all, to better understand the climate impacts on certain like heritage landscapes. And they actually came together with local and regional stakeholders in the discussions of these site analysis. And actually, altogether, they built certain design proposals for more climate resilient future for these sites. And actually, in our experience, when engaging with such more technical professions that deal with more applied sciences, like architecture, engineering, and so forth, what we experience as a good practice is that working on real life cases can really foster more inclusive and collaborative decision making. And actually, it can, it allows a more multidisciplinary or cross-disciplinary exchange of knowledge, exchange of experience, and also learning from real life practice and experiences. Yeah, so in conclusion, actually, there are like a myriad ways of and methods to support participatory processes for inclusive and equitable transformational pathways and climate adaptation actions. It is also important to employ participatory methods and tools to complement data collected through climate science and mixed methodologies. So actually, participatory processes can be an added value to the data that is derived and actually analyzed, synthesized, and then actually tested and validated. So in the end, actually, also these processes, they can really help policy and decision makers to better understand diverse needs and also perspectives of diverse stakeholder groups, community groups. It can prioritize inclusive strategies and ultimately develop more effective and equitable adaptation strategies and actions. So yeah, I think I'll end my presentation here, but I very much look forward to the Q&A and discussion, and I can also elaborate further on the examples that I presented here. And also, I highly recommend looking into the websites of these projects to have more access to the data. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Deniz. That was a very, very interesting presentation. So I suggest I can open the Q&A. I see no one has yet typed anything in the Q&A box. So this is just a reminder for the audience. But if no one started, I can just start with my questions because it was such an interesting presentation. There were so many interesting input to reflect upon. So let me see. Okay, I see there is a question in the Q&A. Okay, 2 already. Amazing. So let's start with the audience questions first.
Yeah, sure.
So Mariam asks, how can we preserve the intangible cultural heritage related to coastal heritage, please? Thank you. That is a kind of a broad question in terms of how can we do that?
Yeah, of
based
course,
on your experience so far.
Yeah, I mean, thank you very much for this question. And it's actually an essential question, I believe. I think, I mean, there is, of course, no one size fits all response to it because every site is quite unique in the sense of the values and attributes that are attached to these sites. So I think the first step would be to first identify what are the intangible cultural assets and attributes of communities to these sites. And then, of course, in some cases, under the impacts of climate change, loss and damage will be inevitable. So in such like changes or like in the like cases of like unmanageable loss and damage, what is to be protected? It's important to identify what to be protected and how it can be done. So there are different ways to approach this. Some is through like documentation of all the intangible heritage assets in the way of doing things in the cultural traditions. Like, for instance, if there are certain rituals or festivals or something, it's also important to try to, I mean, make some ways to continue it. For instance, I'll give you again an example from the Netherlands. For instance, the ice skating used to be like a cultural festival for the northern part of the Netherlands, and it was a big competition when all the natural waterways were frozen. There was a big ice skating competition that used to be done on these natural water of 11 cities. And it was a very big competition. Even the King of the Netherlands, when he was younger, he participated in it. So it's a very big national event. But in the past almost 30 years, it didn't happen because due to climate change, I mean, these rivers and the natural waterways, they do not freeze anymore. So it's inevitable that this will be a lost intangible heritage. But the communities have found different ways to deal with it. There have been some alternative, for instance, routes created or alternative ways. So they do the same route, but through cycling or through canoeing during summer. So actually people have different ways to continue the tradition, even though it's no longer there. So, I mean, to cut it short, I mean, I think the first is important to first identify these assets and also what people attach to it, and then try to document it, try to protect, actually really support. It can be through creating economic revenues, or it can be done through like some other cultural ways to try to continue it. And in the case of like an eventual loss and damage, then yeah, try to reiterate it in some other ways, or at least acknowledge and preserve what you can, and then try to find alternative routes, so to speak. I hope I have well. Yeah.
Thank you. And that actually connects a lot to the point that was made in previous presentations about heritage not being something static, no, especially the intangible one tends to, like, it changes with society. So it's like, it's never something that stays as it is forever. It's associated to the people that make it. And so it makes perfect sense. So we have 3 more questions here. So I'm quickly moving to the next one. Susan is asking, there are still some local markets and financial activities that remain alive along the coastal lines. What is your opinion on safeguarding the coastscape and preserving the image of these heritage places, considering the challenges posed by sea level changes, climatic conditions, and financial issues? I hope I read it clearly.
Yeah, I mean, also, I think it's a very relevant question, especially for these communities who rely on these socioeconomic activities. I mean, of course, there can be ways to support them financially. Some incentives can be created to provide more economic revenues in cases where these activities cannot be sustained in the long term, or there can be some short-term interruptions. So it's important that there are some sort of financial support to ensure that these activities continue. And also, I mean, like preserving the image of these heritage places, also pretty much a lot of discussion, the same discussion that goes on with the coastal heritage sites that we deal with, and also the example that I present to you regarding Altdown. So there is this the raising of the flags like strategy that has been taken in a top-down manner, where it really disturbs the image of the place and actually just disconnects the people from their relation towards it. So what to do? I think that's why it's important to be inclusive in the planning and also the implementation stages at this stage. So to better understand what they really value, and when making decisions, of course, there are other adaptation actions that you can take. So there should be a consensus that has been reached between different parties, so that the one that is more in the favor of the values that are attached to the places should be undertaken. So I think, again, inclusiveness can be a key, a participatory process can play a key role here. Yeah.
Thank you. The next questions from Frank. He's asking, I was wondering about the AI factor, as we value antiques and heritage due to experience and cultural education, but how does an AI learn about what human values?
Well, at this point, AI, or ChatGPT or any other tools that we see around, of course, they cannot really interpret the values that the people assign to these places. What it can interpret is how it is reflected in the existing publications or like in the open sources data that is available. So what is maybe perhaps important is to have as much as documentation of these values that are assigned to these sites, and make them openly available and accessible, so that, you know, if you write to ChatGPT, you know, what is the values attached to certain like coastal heritage sites or coastal spaces, so that it can actually collect and detect these values from maybe similar or other types of places, and then actually it can learn and actually contribute to it. The examples that I presented to you, in these examples, the AI was trained actually to analyze large data sets through text mining or image mining, and these were done in the sense that you actually train it to identify certain trends of using certain themes or sentiments, or in the sense of image, certain like images that actually can identify the cause of the change, then actually you train the machine so that it can detect and collect them and synthesize them. So again, the humans play an important interpreter and important driver here in the So I hope I have responded well to your question, Frank.
Thank you. Yeah, that was super clear. Thank you. We have a couple of questions more, and then if we have time, I'm going to ask mine. Otherwise, we can end the session. So the next question from Katie, she asks, you mentioned the difficulty in measuring and evaluating adaptation actions. Have you found any good solutions to this? Do you think there is a role for participatory processes in evaluating success?
Yeah, thank you very much, Katie. And also, I think you're a really pioneering expert on the field there. So thank you very much also for participating. Not yet. It's work in progress, but I don't think it can only these indicators or criteria for or the metrics for climate adaptation actions. There are also, of course, like different experts and policymakers working on it. There are also certain early actions or indicators that have been collected. It also exists in the policy documents or in the for the global goal of adaptation or some other sorts of policy documents. But yet, I think culture and heritage is not also well integrated into that sense. And the recent article from Diana Reckon and also some IPCC authors such as Lisa Skipper and so, they define, most probably this article, they defined a continuum between adaptation and maladaptation. And they defined I think 7 or 8 criteria that actually defines when adaptation can turn into maladaptation and so. But what is missing there, they also included like 3 or 4 social and 3 and 4 environmental criteria there. What is missing is actually culture and heritage. And I really do think participatory processes can play a significant role here, because also within the heritage field, we have the methodology or the knowledge on how to assess impact, how to assess values. And this methods and these methodology and tools that we use in heritage field can really contribute to adaptation planning and practice. And I think to avoid maladaptation, because always the issue is that there are some global goals, but when they're applied to locally, it can have really counter reactions or like really unprecedented negative consequences. So I think it's really important that decisions are also made locally, and this can be done through participatory processes, I believe.
Thank you. The next and final question in the Q&A box is from Sarah. She asks, can you explain if there are ongoing ways for communities to stay involved after the initial planning in this inclusive method? And also, can people from different parts of the world join and share their knowledge?
With living labs, for instance, the purpose is to have them in long term, so that people do not only join 1 or 2 like focus groups or sessions and then that's it. So actually the whole purpose of, for instance, living labs is that it's a like collective decision-making tool for the long run, so that it can be used for also future decision-making, for future adaptation planning and practices. So that's a way, but of course it's very challenging. And also again, there is not a one-size-fits-all solution to have a long-term sustainability for these participatory processes. It very much relies on the people involved in the objectives and mechanisms that are used. And if certain it can be again bottom up or top down, but it's also very much helps when administrators or at least some groups really support the processes. And how can people from different parts of the world join in? Well, it depends on what type of methods they employ. If it's open to public participation, public consultation, if it's done more digitally and online, I'm sure they will be open to public. But if it's a very much local base, then I guess it will be limited to the local participants. And I see that.
Thank you. We have a follow-up question on another answer that you gave, asking if, always Susan, asking if can machine learning be used in the prediction of coastal shape in the future regarding the fast climate change impacts?
It is definitely being used. So it's also being used for prediction modeling. What geoscientists and like climate scientists do look at climate paths. So they look how the certain erosions and how the landscape have changed over time in the past centuries or like more, and then actually they can rely on this past coastal change and data, and also integrating it with the climate modeling for future and like the climate scenarios that are developed by scientists. Using these climate models, they can of course develop some predictions of coastal change, and they have been used significantly. For instance, there was a study that was published in Nature Communications a couple of years ago, where they used different climate scenarios from IPCCS to predict how many or how much the archaeological sites within the Mediterranean region. No, it was the World Heritage Sites, I'm sorry, not archaeological sites only, but the World Heritage Sites within the Mediterranean basin or the region will be affected by the 4 different climate scenarios developed by IPCCS. So yes, this kind of predictive modeling is very much done. I think they didn't use machine learning, but yeah, it can definitely help the process now that it's more intensively used.
Thank you very much. So all the questions in the Q&A have been answered. So we still have 6 minutes. I'm going to ask very quickly my question. I was really curious about the projects, all of them that you've illustrated. And I was wondering if you could elaborate a bit on the inclusivity aspect, because you were mentioning about the inclusivity process, which I'm assuming is about opening to different knowledge holders, right? So just not just the academics, but also communities. And I was wondering, then all the activities were very much visually oriented. So there was the virtual reality, augmented reality, and whether or not that was considered as some sort of an obstacle in terms of inclusivity, because it's like one single sense. So we are open to a lot of knowledge holders, but we still remain not totally able to encompass the broader society because of our limitations in the sense of what we can produce and how we can communicate that. So yeah, I was more of a reflection around that theme.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, thank you. I mean, of course, my experience is limited to the European projects that I'm involved in. So all these are the sites that I deal with. The applied work that I do is mostly within Europe. Very different from the rest of the world, from the Americas, from the Africa, and like the rest of the continents. Because, for instance, we don't have that much indigenous knowledge keepers, or it's a bit much more easier to engage local communities. What we try to do is try to be inclusive and try to include different community and social groups, including the young groups or women, as well as the relevant stakeholders. And actually, participatory process have very much been in practice in most of the European countries. So it's not really that much of challenging to support such processes, but it is not the case for most of the other like countries. For instance, I also worked in South America or in Turkey and the Middle East, where participatory processes are really more difficult and challenging because, for instance, like in Turkey or the Middle East, like these are not also legally supported, and also the administration is much more top-down, and there's very little public consultation. It's not in their traditional practice to actually have consultations with the community groups or the publication, so it can become really challenging. And in terms of working with visualizations, we also have, because I come from a department of architecture and built environment, so visualizations or the visual outcomes are very much what we are very familiar to work with. But we also had this kind of a handicap or challenge, because when we were working in terms of building some future climate scenarios, what we want to create was kind of like some visual interpretations of how different levels of water rise will have impact on these coastal areas. You know, how much of the area will be submerged underwater, how much will it affect the landscape. But when we created these visuals, then there was actually a bit of a hesitation from the local administrators and regional authorities, and they didn't really want us to use these, even though they were just like projections. Of course, they do not reflect that much of the real life scenarios. Maybe they really were hesitant for us to use them because they said that it might have caused some different misinterpretations from from the communities or the like some stakeholders, and that they can really think that this is what's going to happen, not just some scenarios or projections, and then it could really create a misinterpretation. So that's why at some point we avoided using them and just let it to their imagination, so to speak. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm conscious of time, so I think I'm now leaving the concluding remarks to Francesco.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Kaya, for that great presentation and for that great discussion, and for taking the time to answer all of the audience questions. And thank you, Monia, for moderating and for joining us again, and for helping guide that discussion, and for your great question at the end there as well. And of course, thank you to everybody who attended today for supporting the series and for supporting the sessions, and for taking the time to be here and attend and ask questions and take part in the discussion. So we appreciate that very much. And just quickly before we go, I would just like to share my screen one last time to show our next session that is coming up. So our next session will be on Monday, April 8th, 2024, at the same time, with speaker Dr. Cecily Smith-Christensen, who will be speaking on World Heritage Tourism Futures. So if that is of interest to you, or anyone that you might know within your network, please share this upcoming session, and remember that registration is always open and free. So thank you very much. And I hope everybody has a great day. Thank you again for that great presentation. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.